So time is either your enemy or your friend. So with 6 years left, I think it's your friend, but start now in terms of the sustainability agenda would be my advice. Well, we work very, very closely with the ODA. So, for example, I had monthly meetings with my counterpart from the ODA. And indeed, as the ODA was starting to wind down a couple of years before the Olympic Games, I recruited some of their people to work in my team. They had very relevant experience, and therefore it made sense to take some of that experience and build it into my own team. So we work very closely with the ODA. And we certainly looked at it as carrying on the great work that they'd done in sustainability. We certainly thought it behoved us to do every bit as well as the ODA had done. I think it's really important to set out early on what sustainability means to Tokyo 2020. So for me, that's the first thing you need to do, to be absolutely clear. And in order to do that, I think you also need to get a very clear commitment from the very top of the organisation in Tokyo 2020 to sustainability, because when that commitment comes from the very top, I think it's easier, therefore, to engage the rest of the organisation and indeed your suppliers to be successful in this area. If you think about time and when we started really in 2005, which was 7 years before the Games started, because when we won the Games and it was announced in Singapore, at that same time we made the commitment to have the most sustainable Games ever in London. So we made a commitment 7 years out, and we made it right from the top of the organisation. So working with suppliers, in many instances our commitment was probably much greater than they were used to, but we were very clear what we meant by sustainability. I think, as you referenced earlier, we created the Sustainable Sourcing Code, we published it, we put it online, and then we pre-qualified our suppliers. So if a supplier wasn't prepared to sign up to our commitments and to meet the standards that we set, then effectively we had a no-go system, whereby if a supplier didn't want to sign up, then they would not be considered a supplier to LOCOG. But most suppliers were only too willing to embrace the whole sustainability agenda that we set, and indeed they thrived on it and wanted to work with us to develop that agenda further. So the relationship with suppliers was generally, I think, across the board very, very good. Of course, there are always going to be instances where the standards that we set are perhaps higher than some suppliers are used to, and therefore we offered to help those suppliers by giving them some consultancy, some advice, use some other organisations who could advise on sustainability, and a number of suppliers, smaller suppliers in particular, welcomed that. Specifically, firstly, we set up a monitoring system. We used a CEDEX as a requirement for our particular international suppliers to sign up to CEDEX, and vast majority of suppliers did that. So that helped. I think also our suppliers were quite willing to step up to the mark around the measurement. They understood what we wanted, and they themselves wanted to be able to say quite openly that they had stepped up to the standard. There were a couple of licensees where we did struggle, and those were goods that were coming in from Chinese suppliers, and where the sourcing had been done with suppliers who had their individual production sites approved, but they'd subcontracted the work to another plant, which was not approved. So we did pick that up, but by and large everybody said, everybody did exactly as they said they would do. I think largely Tokyo and London, I think Tokyo will be judged in the very same way as London was judged. So I think the first thing to always remember is that for the Olympics, it's a world stage, and that world stage is now. So therefore people will start to look at you from today onwards. Particularly, they will start to focus on you after the next Olympic Games in Rio. So straight after that, I think you'll find the level of scrutiny on Tokyo will start to rise. So therefore, you need to expect that. So I think, for example, particularly people in procurement, I think their experience at London was probably quite unique, because largely you're not involved so much in the media scrutiny that is attached to the Olympic Games. When the Olympic Games comes, I think the procurement people find themselves a lot more exposed to media coverage than perhaps ever before. So I think you'll find something very similar in Tokyo. And it's not just the Tokyo media, you know, the national Japanese media, it'll be the international media, so people from all over the world are looking at what you're doing.